Welcome to the Trail Chasers podcast. I'm your host, Dean Horwitz, and I'm excited to share this journey with you. Each week, we'll be hitting the trails with some of South Africa's most inspiring trail runners, diving into the topics that matter most and uncovering the secrets of this incredible sport. Lace up your trail shoes and join me on this adventure. New episodes every week. Hello, welcome, Rebecca, to the Trail Chasers.
Thanks.
I'm very excited to have you on. I think we've been trying to get this right for a while.
Yeah, sorry.
I think for me, what I always find interesting is the way that people are portrayed. I fell into that trap of these are the favorites for the race, and we put so much pressure on that, and it's all very much just a perception of who we know. And I think for me, it was like, whoa, like, where did you come from? I had Jasmine Loth on here who won the 100K, and she was like, yeah, anyone can have like a dark horse moment and get on the podium. But I don't know if I agree with that to such an extent. I think it's more a case of that overnight success is 10 years in the making. So welcome. Thank you. Welcome back to Cape Town.
Thanks.
I like to start these things with a bit of a race visualization. When you're on a start line of a race, how is that process working for you? What is going through your mind? Is it a kind of set strategy, or is it kind of you feeling the vibes? How do you operate?
I think it very much depends on the race. Previously, I'd been super specific, almost too much so, with kind of exact splits of where I wanted to be and how far along and what pace I wanted to run. And I just found it wasn't working for me. So for the last races, I have maybe one or two very important races in a year for me. And then those I'll attack very specifically in training. And when I come to the start line of that specific race, I'm very focused. I have a set plan of how I want to execute it, especially if I've done the race before. If it's something, for example, Cape Town Trail Marathon, I've not run the course. No one has. It's a brand new course. It's very hard to know how fast to go, how to fuel, how to plan it, how strategy. I also didn't know who I was really running up against. Then it's more a case of, okay, I'm going to try and work towards a time I think I can complete this in. I think it'll be a good time. And then I kind of just feel it as I'm going. It's not as important to execute it so specifically that I think it needs to be done this way in order to win. So yeah, it depends on how important the race is to me and then if I've done it before or not.
And would you say that this year has kind of been a breakout year for you?
Definitely. I think, so I started running in 2020 and last year I switched up my training. I was previously doing very polarized training, so very easy days. And then the hard days were a very hard effort and maybe shorter intervals than what I'm doing now. And it just wasn't working for me. I felt like I wasn't really progressing anymore in the years. As someone who's fairly new to running, I should be progressing quite a bit. So I took a break from structured training and then found someone new to work with as a coach. And within this year, I feel like I've really found a form of training that works for me. I've been able to improve areas that previously I was just so stuck in, like uphill running. I feel like this year I finally started to be like, okay, this is what I thought I could do, and I'm finally getting there. So definitely a breakout year in terms of finally starting to be where I want to be with running. Yeah.
And how do you kind of reflect on the year? As I kind of mentioned, suddenly people are like talking about you and mentioning you. How does that kind of feel?
So weird. I mean, I think because I went and did some races in Europe, I know I'm still not one of the best runners that there are. Like for South African standards now, people think I'm quite good, but I still feel a little bit like, oh, are you sure you want to interview me? Like even here, I'm like, oh, are you sure? It's cool, it's fun, it's so new. It still feels a bit like I'm not the best with being put on a platform in any way. But it's exciting, it's fun, and I think I've got quite a healthy relationship with running, and it's never going to be something that takes away from it for me. I never want to be one of those athletes that's so obsessed with having to do well and it's tied to their self-worth. I really hope that I never fall into that trap. I see the pressure on these athletes. It's very intense. And the more eyes that are watching you, it's like the higher the platform, the harder the fall. I think it's hard not to feel a lot of pressure, and I think you don't perform your best when you have that kind of pressure. So I'm here and I'm enjoying it and it's fun, but my goal is just to be the best athlete I can be. That's just my personality.
Yeah, so if you reflect back to the start line at Otter versus the start line at UTCT, What were the kind of differences, especially in terms of the attention and the media attention?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Otter, they also had me on a start list as one of the elite contenders. And I think I felt more pressure there because it's a race that I'd built up in my mind. It was my goal for the whole year. Every single race I'd done before that, I was thinking about what I can learn for Otter. And I went into it with a really big block and high hopes for myself. And at the start, I like to set a goal of a time I'd like to finish in. That's sort of how I approach each race. And I was like, okay, I think I can finish between 5 hours and 5 hours 10. And that'll be like, if I can do that, amazing. And I was bang in the middle, which was amazing. But I felt a lot of pressure on myself for that race. UTCT, I felt more external pressure. I went into the training block not as serious. I was having a lot of fun with training. I was doing long runs with friends if I wanted to. I was doing some road training because it made me happy. And then when I got to the start line, there were like interviews beforehand, a lot that goes into a race before the race. So at Otter, you arrive to the race village and it's like prologue and then you're racing. UTCT, it's like Tuesday trails, it's interviews beforehand, it's other athletes, it's meet and greets. And even though it wasn't a lot around me, I was involved in a lot of it. And you do feel a little bit of external pressure for sure. I think I didn't have as much pressure for a specific time for this race. I had a more or less I'd like to, and then that didn't really happen. But to be honest, I think from Wednesday, I felt unwell to the point I like had a teary phone call with a friend and I was like, I don't know if I should go to the start line. I don't know if I can do this. And that's when I was like, oh, you're feeling external pressure to even show up to the race. And I don't want to get into that habit. It wasn't a thing that got completely in my head, I don't think.
Yeah. And, just touching on that, I've kind of noticed a pattern with elite athletes, that often if they're in that kind of position, they don't take the start line or they would pull out pretty early. Some say it's kind of to affect the rankings, and I do get it from a perspective of like, if you had finished and you finished like 50th, no one's going to be like, oh, shame, you were sick, What is that kind of pressure like? And, is it easier not to take to the start line?
I'm really glad you brought this up. I was having this conversation with one of the athletes earlier in the week and I was like, I'm just going to say my opinion and people are going to hate me for it. But I do lose a bit of respect for athletes who DNF purely because they don't want to finish the race and get a bad rating or a bad score. I think it's hard as an athlete, when it comes to especially this time of year, it's like contract season and people look at your rating and you have a sort of value based on your rating. And I think it must be so hard to have your self-worth tied to it because it is, it's your income. It would be silly to be like, oh no, I don't care at all. I'm sure you do, but there's a difference between having a bad race and continuously having bad races and people who drop out once for whatever reason. I think, it's normal to have a high pressure race in DNF and it's maybe a process you have to go through. There's no judgment there, but it's not something I think that you want to get into the habit of, because otherwise what's the point in doing it if you're not going to even finish the race all the time? But every now and then it happens and it's probably going to happen to me. And I'd had this discussion and like stated my opinion. And then I had this DNF and I was like, oh, this is like karma for judging. But at the same time, I think it's so different. I've seen athletes like almost destroy their bodies to get to the finish line and then take months off and not be able to do other races. And then you're affecting your livelihood, your mental health, your body just to finish a race. I don't think that's smart. If it's in the middle of your season and you've got other races and you're pushing yourself and you have a niggle or an injury or you're sick, I don't think it's worth it just to finish a race. It's not like you're a person who's going into a race just to finish the race. You're going to perform, to push yourself, to compete. It's very different to an average person who's like, oh, but I really want to finish. I just want to get to the finish. The longer the distance, the more it becomes a difficulty and a possibility of not finishing a race. I think anyone can kind of blag it for a 23 and then you can feel awful afterwards. When it starts to get to like 60 plus, I think it's much harder to carry on and you put your body through a lot. So it's a touchy subject, I think, and everyone has their own opinion and their own relationship with it. I'm never going to finish a race if it risks my health. And that's the standard that I'll set for myself always. I even did a race once after COVID. I did Otter and I thought I'd recovered. It had been like a month. And it was horrible. The consequence of that, I was out for so long. So I knew when I felt, I was like, my temperature's high. I don't feel well. This is not a case of I'm not performing well and I'm going to stop because of my ego. This was like, I feel horrendous. And I'm not going to put my body through another 20 odd kilometer of feeling like this. It's not worth it for me. It's the end of the season as well. I've had a great year. Like I don't need to finish this just to because of, like any other reason.
Exactly. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And, in the moment, so you started, you didn't feel great. What was the kind of attitude? Was it just like, let's see how far I can get?
Yeah.
And then once you kind of hit that point, how does that factor in? How do you separate mind and body and be like, okay, this is, as you say, like, this is it?
So I woke up, felt like my headache was still raging. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I've got two options. I don't start at all, or I go and I warm up and maybe I start, and then let's just see how this goes. And I think, the easier thing for the ego would maybe have been to not start at all. Maybe the wiser thing, even if you're sick. I just wanted to give it a go, and I warmed up and I felt kind of okay, and I started. And because you start with a bit of a downhill, I was like, okay, no, actually my legs feel all right. Maybe this will be fine. And I was okay pretty much until Rocket Road. And then Suffer Peak. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's horrible at the best of times. And as I was climbing, I was just like, I've been running this climb in training and I can't. And my head was pounding and I just felt so warm. And I was like, maybe it is just a hot day, but I feel abnormally hot and I'm sweating so much. And then got to Hout Bay and I was like, okay, I'm still doing well. Like I'm exactly on the split that I wanted to be for this point. So maybe I can, like push through and it'll all be fine. And then got out of Hout Bay, and then the next uphill again, I was just walking out these sections and I was like, it's just not going to happen. And then I was like, okay, let's just see, like just try and get to the next aid station and just assess on the go. But it's really hard to keep pushing when you're kind of already playing with the idea that you feel so unwell. I just couldn't put it out of my mind. And then I got to Constantiaberg. Is it Constantiaberg? I think that's what it's called. Anyway, Constantia, the water point. The Alphen
or the
full Alphen.
Okay, Bo Constantia.
Yeah, and I saw Kimmy was there, and my friend Kimmy and Samantha, and they were both like, "You're doing so well." And I was like, "Guys, I feel like shit.
Yeah,
I feel so horrible." And they were like, "What's wrong?" And I was like, "I'm so hot." And they couldn't help me there. So I had like volunteers pour water on me and I filled up. I was like, okay, maybe some Coca-Cola, maybe some water. And then I was like, Sam, I don't know if I should keep going. Like I really feel sick. And she was like, it's downhill to Alphen. Like, let's just go to Alphen. The whole crew's there. And then, like, I'll see you there. I was like, okay. And then as I was running down, I was like, I can't even run downhill properly. Like I'm so far off. My body feels horrible. And I was like, I had told everyone I'm the kind of person in an aid station, I really need tough love. Like I need to be reminded, you signed up for this. You're hurting because you wanted to,
Sure.
And they did that, and that's amazing. It's what I need. But on that day, I was like, everyone's going to help you to keep going. You're going to have to be strong for yourself to stop.
Yeah.
And I was like, you're going to get a lot of, your mind starts going like, everyone's going to think that I'm just dropping out because it's not going well, or I'm going to have people, and I did, who are like, but you've raced so much. Like maybe you train too much. Maybe you're overtraining because like you've improved so quickly. And I was like, you just need to like be within yourself now. What do you need? What does your body want?
Yeah.
And I was like, I need to stop. This is just not my day. And I'm not going to risk getting bronchitis for one run when I've had a great year. So made the call to stop, and I'm really glad I did. Like I felt horrible. I was sitting there and I had all these people helping me, and I was like, I'm so warm. And then they were like, it's really hot out there. I was like, no, I'm so warm. And they took my temperature, like, okay, she's got a temperature. And then I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not in my head. Like, I'm not good. Yeah. It was really good. I think it had to happen. It was going to happen at some point. Probably won't be the last time it happens. And then you just like learn from it and grow from it. You get to sit in the uncomfortable aftermath of everyone asking, how are you doing? Yeah. How's it going?
Sorry.
How are you feeling? And it's fine. Like, I think it's good. And every time I just answered, I was like, yeah, I've been better. But it was also, I think that's the beauty of one of these races where you've got races afterwards as well. I got to go and support on the course and see other people have great days. And like, it still felt like a really great weekend despite having an awful day myself. Yeah. And that was really special.
Amazing. If we can kind of go back, where did this all start? Where did the love of running start? Where did the love of trail running start? What was that kind of moment?
I did a half marathon when I was 19. So like forever ago, like 10 years ago. And when I finished, I was like, I didn't train well. And I finished so tired. And I was like, I can't believe people do double this. Like I watched people finish them and I was like, they are crazy. This is awful. And I was like, one day I'll do a full one. And I was like, by 2020, I'll do a full marathon. And then 2020 approached and I hadn't been running since then. I was like, wow, I remember saying I was going to do a marathon by 2020. So I was like, okay, this could be cool. So I signed up to do a marathon. This was like February, I think, 2020. Then COVID happened. And I'd been training really hard and sort of fell in love with the process of running on the road at that point. The marathon I signed up for got cancelled, and I was like, oh, I've done all this training. Like, I'm just going to keep running until the next possibility. And then everything kept getting cancelled. So I was like training myself, like definitely overtraining at that point for a marathon that never came. And then someone was like, you should try trail. I think you'd really like it. And I was like, what is trail running? Yeah. And they were like, like running on, like hiking trails. I was like, people do not run on hiking trails. That's madness, like, are you insane? And then actually someone had said, oh, like, Otter, people run Otter. I was like, no, they don't. There's no way, And then looked into it, and it was so bizarre that I was like, I wonder if I could do that. Yeah. And found a trail marathon. I think that was the beginning of 2021. And that was my first marathon. First marathon was a trail marathon. Wow. It was like some very small marathon called Van Stadens near Port Elizabeth. Okay. And I did that and actually did quite well. I came second. I bonked horribly. I was like walking from 30 kilometers. Yeah. At that point, had no idea about fueling, no idea about pacing, like no idea about anything. Yeah. I just loved it. I got quite competitive about it. I was like, wow, I came second. Like, maybe I can do this. This is so fun. And just fell in love with trail running as a whole. Like, the sport was so bizarre to me. And then found the next marathon to do. And I was like, cool. And again, I was so oblivious to anything. Went to run this with like not really having run much after that marathon because I was so incredibly sore. And then again, like had no idea about fueling and went out way too hard. And then I ended up like racing with Lundy for the last 8 kilometers. I think she just had a baby. So she wasn't as like, top performance then. I had no idea who she was either. And I was just like running with her for the last bit. And then we did like a sprint finish and I finished second again. And then I was like, oh, maybe I'm actually like quite good at this. Yeah. And then, that was pretty much what like by that point, the bug had bitten. And then it was just a case of like, when's the next race? What's next? And then started learning about nutrition and started learning about training and just geeking out a bit. I have like an all or nothing personality. So I was going to end up being all in. And then since then, it's just been year after year trying to learn, trying to improve. And then really in the last year, I like really think I found the training that works for me. And I improved quite dramatically, even in things like I did a roadblock in the beginning of the year. And I did my first half, and I think I did like 1:26. And I remember there was a time, 2 years ago where I couldn't run faster than 4:50 a K. And then to do that, I was like, wow, I ran, like that's so cool for me. It's amazing. And then that kind of carried on into the rest of the year, like slowly progressing. So I'm excited to keep going and see where it goes and like how much I can improve. I think there's still room, hopefully. Yeah. So that's the background.
Amazing. And growing up, were you quite sporty as a kid?
Yeah, I did ballet until I was like 18, so my whole life. And because of that, I wasn't allowed to do running because they don't complement each other. But after that, I think the discipline is very much there. Like showing up every day for sports very easy for me. Yeah. So it was an easy thing to like get into running and then be able to do the training every day, which I think is the hardest thing. It's just to be consistent. So I found that part of it quite easy. And then also just doing hard things. Like anyone who's done ballet dancing knows it's very, very hard and very painful. Yeah. So it's like a familiar, although very different thing. It's like the base is there.
And, moving to Europe, that wasn't because of running, correct?
No. Yeah.
So it's quite interesting because obviously a lot of people become good at running and then move to Europe to become better at running. But that didn't happen for you in that way. Talk to me a bit about that process.
So I worked actually on super yachts for a long time, for 4 years before 2020, so before I was a runner. Yeah. So I've traveled quite extensively through the Mediterranean and through Europe. And then I found classical painting around also 2020. And then I ended up going to spend some time in Florence last year for a course that I did there. And then this year, I gave myself some time to go and be in Europe to paint, to run, a bit of like a sabbatical, I suppose. So moving to Europe, it was sort of like, I'm going to go for the summer, I'm going to run, I'm going to paint, and I'm going to have fun. And it was sort of like that side of it, or that was what took me there. But because I've traveled for so many years, it almost feels normal to travel every year. I'm really lucky in that way. So it's not that I necessarily moved there, but I was like, another summer traveling in Europe. And then tried to tie it in with a couple races, which was really cool. Yeah.
And what is it like racing in Europe, coming from South Africa, coming from, as you said, like not going to Europe to run? So you had like kind of no expectation. What was that kind of experience like?
Oh my gosh, it is so fast. It's like a whole other thing. Like, especially Ciesenal, it was mind-blowing. I remember at the start line, I was just like, what am I doing here? Yeah. Who do I think I am? Yeah. But so cool. And once you've lined up in that race with that many extremely fast athletes, it really becomes you versus you. There was no way I was going to win or top 5 or top 10 in that race. And so it was like me versus me against really great people. And you do, when you are running against really fast people, you just push yourself. You get times that you just didn't realize you could do. Such good experience in that way. And also, to learn to back yourself even when you're running against super, super good people. Because it is, at the end of the day, it's you versus you. Like, you have no control over your competition, over what training they've done, over what day they're going to have. So standing there like worrying about, is she going to be better? It's not doing you any good. Like, it's not going to give you a good day. You have to just focus on, okay, I've done the training. This is my strengths. How can I use that to my advantage to get my best performance? And that really came into practice for me in Europe, 100%.
Yeah, incredible. And how was the experience, racing in Europe for those kind of first few months, coming back to South Africa? And how's the kind of experience now in South Africa going to take you back into Europe? Yeah,
it's very, very different kind of racing. I think the trails in Europe are so smooth. And I think the biggest difference and the biggest benefit is that the uphills are very runnable. Like, people are running those uphills, whereas our uphills are so steep that it is more of a power hike. But you still have to be good at running uphill. Training there and learning to get good at running uphill, I really feel like that benefited me here, because now every single section that's a runnable uphill, my brain knows, okay, we run this. You don't have to hike it. Whereas I think before I could get into I just wasn't very good at running uphill. I hadn't practiced running uphill really. And so it was like, oh, we're at an incline. Okay, I'm going to hike this. Whereas now it's not the case. I couldn't run every single uphill. I feel like I can. There's still loads of room to improve. Like, Bianca's uphill is incredible and I'm nowhere near that good yet. But hopefully with time and really just keep applying what I've learned and keep doing uphill running, you just get better. So I think that was super beneficial. Also, being at altitude, I'd never done that before. So I was staying at 1,500 meters, and that was a nice balance. I struggled at first, and it took a while to adjust, and recovery was a bit slow for me. I don't know. I think it affects everyone differently, but really felt the benefit of that going back to sea level. I did like 1K intervals after that, and I was just like almost 15 seconds faster per K, which is huge. So that was really amazing. I also raced Eiger, which has, I could be wrong, but I think it's about 20 kilometers at 2,000 meters. So, like, you're high. It's really hard. I was at almost the top of the highest point, and I was like, why can I not move? And then I was like, you're high. The air is thin. But it was really good experience. And then what else? I would say, so uphill, altitude, bit of heat, but also just the caliber of people you're racing against.
I think that's big.
It's huge. Yeah.
And you did mention the classical painting. Where did that come in? What do you kind of carry across from running to classical painting, and I guess from classical painting to running? Yeah, I mean, they quite like worlds apart, but I've always just loved painting and decided to try and pursue it more full time quite a few years ago. And then slowly over time, I've been able to do that, which is amazing because it allows me time to be able to run and train in a day. Like, I get to set my hours. I think what's nice is that like recovery is for me very much eating. It's like the most important thing, but then also resting. And when I'm painting, I'm very still, and they kind of complement each other in that way. I think if I had a job that had required me to be on my feet all the time, it is quite limiting with the running. So it's beautiful that they sort of complement each other in that way. And then I love to do landscape painting. When I'm running, I often see spots and I'm like, oh, I'm going to bring the paints back here. But they both have that link with nature. I think that's where the two kind of come across together. That's amazing. And the yachting, like, how did that, where did that come from? And also, like, what is the, are you still doing it? And, how does that kind of affect the running? And I'm not doing it anymore. And one of the reasons was because it's so restricting in having free time to exercise and to run. It's near impossible when you're working charter seasons. You're on the boat all the time for the guests with maybe 2-hour break in a day where you're not allowed to leave the boat. So it would be impossible to be competing at a high level or just running often and doing that kind of job. But it was a way for me to leave South Africa, to save, to travel. It was incredible. I don't regret it at all, but I knew I wasn't the happiest version of myself. I wasn't the best version of myself. I needed more mental stimulation. I needed to be able to move my body, and I wasn't getting that. So it was never a long-term thing for me. I'm glad I've done it, and I think it gave me a lot of experience in life and travel. Yeah.
Actually, I had someone ask me about it who was on the boat who enjoys running. He was like, how did you train it? I was like, I didn't. I don't think you can do the two together. If you're lucky, you get like a treadmill, but it's not the same.
Yeah. And when was the moment that you were like, I want to be a professional runner?
Oh, I don't know if I've had the moment yet. I feel like until this year, I didn't even know if I could.
Yeah.
I think it was like, I feel like I've got more in me, but I don't know yet. And until you get the results, it's just kind of like a thing in your mind. So that's why Ottawa was really important, because I was like, I feel like if I can podium there, if I can get a good time, it'll be like, okay, maybe I can do this. Yeah. And when I finished and I got the time that I know I trained for, it was like, that was the best possible time I was going to have on the day realistically. I was like, okay, I can do what I think I can do. And also just the amount that I've improved in the last year, I think that's like huge for me. And after these couple races, you know, it's a great life to be able to run every day, travel to races, see the world. They're really great people that you get to meet. The community is incredible. So yeah, now I'm like, wow, I would love this life. It's really, really good, but it's hard work. It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah. When you look back and straight off the top of your mind, you know, what are the kind of highlights of your running journey? I
used to be so afraid of doing so many things. And I remember the first time I was running with a friend and he was like, okay, we're going to go up there. And I was like, the hell we are.
Yeah.
I'm not going to run up there. And he was like, no, we're going to run up there. It was the VK in George. Okay. And I was like, oh my, are you insane? What if you decided that we'd like, because you've warned me before we showed up. And then I got to the top and I was like, oh my God, that's insane. How did I just do that? I can't believe my body can do that. And I was scared of heights as well.
Oh, wow.
So there were a few sections I was like, what am I doing? This is so stupid. And I overcame that. And then I was like, wow, my body can do really hard things. The first time I did a long run by myself, because I was too scared to run alone as a woman. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so badass. Like, I just did this 30-kilometer run by myself in the mountains. This is so cool. And I think it really, really did give me confidence. Like if you'd asked me to do a podcast a few years ago, I'd have been like, hell no, I'm not sitting with you. Like there's no way. So it really gave me a sense of like, I can do hard things in life in general. And it gave me this courage. Like I did this trail race in France called Trail du Bozel Montchauvet or something. It's in Courchevel. And you climb 2,200 meters from the get-go straight up and then 2,000 down. It's 30 kilometers. And I remember looking and being like, oh, okay, the girl who doesn't like to climb. And I got to the top and I was like running on a ridge with snow either side, terrified. And so amazed that I was doing this. I was like, this is so cool. I would never have thought I'd be the person to be up here at like 8 o'clock in the morning, just race up this mountain surrounded by snow in France. Like, this is so cool. This world, this life, it's amazing. So I think, the first VK I climbed, very cool. Long run by myself, unreal. And then that race in particular, I was like, this is so cool.
Amazing. And challenges, you know, on the journey, what have they been and how have you kind of dealt with them?
I've been very lucky that I haven't had many injuries. I tore my calf early on before I was being coached just from stupid training. And then I actually did it during like playing squash, you know, like that high impact. I was like, oh man. But since then I haven't had many injuries. So super lucky in that regard. I think, for a while I just felt like I wasn't going anywhere and I got really in my head about it. And then had to make the decision. I was like, I need a break from structured training. And that was really good for me. But it was very challenging to trust myself to do that and to feel like, okay, I feel like I can do better and maybe I need to try different. It's hard. You form a very close relationship with your coach and to have the self-confidence to be like, this just isn't working for me. I need to find someone else. It's challenging. And I really struggle with confrontation. So it was really hard, but also like that's life. And then I had to think about, okay, if I was a coach, I would want the best for my athlete. And if I could give them the best possible, then I would need to be okay with that. So it's okay for me to do that. But I think that was really hard in the last while. And then also when you're not sponsored, it's really hard to be able to afford to do this. Like to give it as much time as it needs to be really good, really hard. To trust that, okay, maybe I could do this. And I'm going to put in a lot of effort and I'm going to sacrifice things and I'm going to take financial strain because I really want this. It's really challenging. You know, I was lucky that I had these savings that I could go to Europe and give myself this time, this opportunity. Not everyone has that. And in South Africa, we're so far from big races. Like if you think about it, maybe there's 3 big races that we have a year where someone can show the world that they are incredible.
Yeah.
And it's hard. And it's great that we're getting these international athletes, because if you're racing against them and you do well, that's, you know, you're doing really well. But to have 3 shots in a year and have the training go well, not be sick, be able to get there, be able to afford an entry, it is really challenging, I think, being in this country and trying to do this. So I'm just really lucky that I did what I did and got this experience. And I'm still not sponsored. I mean, hopefully in the next while, if I keep performing well, I can. But it's challenging to trust that, okay, I'm just going to try.
Going back to the coaching journey, you did mention when you started running, you did it yourself, and then you got a coach, and then you did it yourself again, and now you got a coach. When you were doing it yourself, what did you kind of feel that was missing? You know, or was it just like, I don't know what I'm doing?
I downloaded a Nike Run Club marathon plan, and I was like, cool, I'm just going to do this. But I had no idea. I was like, do a tempo at half marathon pace. I was like, what is my half marathon pace? I don't know. I'm just going to guess, I'm going to blag it. And then you end up just training too hard. Like, my easy runs were not easy. I didn't know what that meant. My long runs were too often. My hard runs were too, like, it was too much. And I mean, I got fast to a certain point from doing that. But then, like I said, I tore my calf. So I felt like, okay, I can't keep doing the same Nike Training Club plan. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to get a coach. Like, let's see how this goes. And because of my personality of like all or nothing, it was a exciting thing for me to do. And then, the decision to leave and change was really, really, really hard. But ultimately, I'd been sitting with it for a while. And eventually I was like, okay, nothing changes if nothing changes. The training's not changing. I'm not changing. So I'm going to change something else. And then self-coach for a little while. I think that time round went much better. I started looking into and researching a lot of different things, reading books, trying to educate myself, which I really enjoy. I'm a bit of a geek in that way. And then found someone, I knew what I wanted. I knew what kind of sessions I felt like I should be doing. I knew that I wanted to improve my uphill. And then I found someone who had a similar outlook as me, similar values. And I was like, okay, I think this can work. And we did a little trial period together. And I was like, okay, I'm feeling good off this training. I feel like I have no secrets, but it's very straightforward. I get like a PDF document, with my training. There's no heart rate zones. Easy is easy. And the thing is, when you've been running for a while, you know what easy is. Like, you're fooling yourself if you think running 4 minutes a K is easy. It's not easy. And it goes all of feel. And I think when you have enough experience, eventually you kind of know if you're being silly or not. You kind of know this training is good. It's pushing me, but I'm not tired all the time. As opposed to, I don't feel pushed. I never feel tired. I think to a certain degree, you want to train hard, you are going to feel tired. But there's a difference between like feeling tired all the time and feeling tired for 1 week out of a block. So I think just with time and experience, I began to realize maybe what I needed and what that looked like. And it might change in the future, but for now it's working.
Yeah. And I think I saw that you got quite a few 4th places. Was that during that time?
That was last year before I switched coaches. I placed 4th at like everything. And I remember feeling so frustrated because often in the races here, you're kind of like battling for 1st, 2nd, like maybe 3rd. And then you're in the next group battling for like 4th, 5th, 3rd, 6th, And I was always in that. I was like, I just want to be in the top group. I don't want to be fighting for just making podium. Like, I just want to, and even now I'm like, I want to be like fighting for 1st, hopefully. But like repeatedly coming 4th is so hard. If it's like podium's right there, but it's not there. And it's like, I still did well, but not that well. It really takes its toll. I was like 4th. I think there were like 4 races in a row. And then in Europe, it was like, I'm not even going to think about podium. I think I did come 3rd at one of the smaller ones and 6th at Eiger, which was cool. Again, I was like, just missed the fit. And then, like now placing 2nd was really, really special to me. It was so good. To just like, okay, comfortably on the podium. Nice. Incredible.
And how did your kind of coaching relationship start with Robbie? How did that kind of come about? Take me back to the beginning of that.
At Otter last year, he won. And I'm always generally quite interested in who wins. So I was like, oh, who's the guy who won? And then they did a interview with him post-race. And I was like, oh, he sounds like he's got his head switched on. There was a few things that he said that I really liked. There's a lot of men in the sport that, no offense, very attached to their ego. They, like, when they're good, they know they're good. And it's just not my crowd or someone that I would be able to be coached by. whereas he's quite humble. And then I saw when I was trying to research him, there was a link to, I think it was something called Training Peaks, which he's no longer actually affiliated with. But I was like, oh, okay, he must coach. And then I listened to a podcast about him, and he spoke a bit about his training and mentioned like his style. And I was like, okay, that sounds like more what I'm looking for. And then I reached out to him. And at that point, he actually wasn't taking on people. He only coaches a select amount of people because he puts in a lot of effort. So he actually wanted to see what I was doing, because a lot of the time people think that what's wrong is their coach.
Yeah.
But they're doing good training. It's just maybe something else. Maybe they're not fueling properly. There's a number of things. So he won't take someone on just for the sake of having money. He's like, if I can genuinely help someone and I want to work with them, then I will. So it was actually like he interviewed me.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, while I interviewed him. And a few things that he spoke about was like, he wanted to know what my eating looked like, because he doesn't want to work with people with eating disorders. Like, he's like, I'm not going to help someone damage their body further.
Yeah.
You know, like we need to be working together on certain things. So there were a few things that he asked me, and then he looked at my training and was like, okay, yeah, I think we can improve on some things, and I have a bit of a different approach. And then for me, I was just like super excited that someone wanted to work with me. And also just by the method that he was training, it was like very much aligned with what I wanted to do. And I was like, cool, this is exciting. I like the way he thinks. And then we started working together like late last year on the roadblock first, and then for the rest of the races this year.
And what is the biggest thing he identified that you kind of needed to work on?
My training wasn't specific enough to the races I was doing. So like, for example, something that we changed was, if I'm doing a race with 3 big uphills, I need to be able to run 3 big uphills. So in the training, we'll then do 3 times 20-minute tempo uphill.
Yeah.
Super specific to the race. Otter was different because it wasn't these big uphills. So it was like we did for this year, I think it was 4 by 8 minutes or 5 by 8 minute uphill, or then it'll be like 6 or 7 by 5 minute uphill.
Yeah.
So the training was just more specific to what the races were. And it was also, he gives me maybe 6 weeks of training in one go, because it's like, we're looking at the big picture here.
Yeah.
And then all of these are lined up. And then along the way, we might switch things out or change things. If something's not working or something didn't go well, then we'll change a session. In general, he was like, you haven't done road training. He does a lot of road training, and you're lacking just running economy.
Yeah.
So essentially, the best thing we can do is just get you to be a better runner.
Yeah.
So the roadblock was great. And I'm looking forward to the next roadblock, because for me, I feel like it's a huge improvement. If I'm good at 5K, I have a better chance of being good at 10K, and then your 10K helps your half marathon, and then, it all translates. So just in general, becoming a better runner, it was what I needed, in not just doing random sessions here and there that don't really have the big picture in mind. So that was probably the biggest change. And then the long runs, we often do quality in the long runs, which is not something I'd done before. My long runs were always like easy long runs, whatever, how many hours. Whereas now, specifically for Otter, I actually did, by fluke, I did a 5K park run on Saturday, just because I felt like I wanted to race something. And then we did a long run the next day with 2 moderate sections in it. So moderate is not that hard. It's like a long race pace, like 6-hour race pace. So I did the 5K park run, nice sore legs. And the next day did that, and it went super well. And afterwards I was like, that's kind of like doing the prologue and then doing the race. Yeah. And it's good. I think practicing race pace in your long runs, it becomes so familiar. So now when I'm racing, I know just by feel, this is the right pace for me, just by effort. Sure. I think that's so valuable. And that's something that I'd never practiced before.
Yeah, that's incredible. You have mentioned a little bit about the fueling and nutrition. How has that kind of developed, and where are you at with that kind of process?
Yeah, I think the most important thing for me is recovery and eating enough. I think in general, a lot of people don't eat enough. My diet is high in carbs. I'm so sick of pasta and rice. I'm so glad the race is done and I don't have to eat pasta and rice. But I think we undervalue how much your body needs, how much it burns. So yeah, nutrition is really, really important to me. 3 times a day, 3 big meals minimum. And then during running, I practice my fueling anything longer, like 90 minutes and above. I'll take fuel with me. I really like liquid carbs. So Never Second, big fan. Locally open fuel's really good. Tailwind's really good. I'm lucky that I don't have a very fussy stomach so far. Yeah. I've had like Cape Town Trail Marathon. I struggled quite a bit. I'm not sure why. I think I was still recovering from Otter, but just couldn't get the food down without feeling super nauseous. So that was new, but I think it was like a random thing. I wasn't like going to obsess over it. In training, I'll try and do minimum 60 grams of carbs per hour for long runs or 90 minutes. I like to take something if I'm doing a hard session as well, even if it's shorter. So like my road sessions, my intervals will be maybe an hour, 20 minutes. But I feel like I need that fuel because I'm working really, really hard.
Yeah.
And you recover well. It's not just about the session, it's about afterwards too. So the long runs, 60 grams per hour. And then I'll try and ramp that up closer to race. So in a race, I try and aim for 90 grams. So in training, I want to mimic that. And you need to get your stomach used to it. I can remember the first time I was just randomly, I was like, okay, I'm going to do 90 grams of carb. Never done it before.
Yeah.
And I was like, your stomach doesn't know what to do with that. You know, like it's just sitting there mixing. You can get it in, but it's not really, going to work. So I think it's really important to practice what you're going to do in race and make sure that it's actually going to work for you. And then I'll have 60 grams of carbs and drink mix and then 1 gel an hour. And it's also nice, like going from gel to gel almost. So when you're racing, you're like, okay, I'm not this far in, but every 30 minutes I need to take this. And then you're kind of like just passing time with your nutrition. I think that's really helpful. Something that I did to train my stomach, I spoke with a nutritionist about it, and he was like, try and eat close to when you're going to run. So the general thing, especially with a lot of the pros, is that they'll eat 2 hours before running every day, like in training as well. And he was like, try and get that time down. It's going to feel awful, but your stomach actually learns to do that. So we started with just toast, like have toast and go run, have a banana and immediately go and run. And he's like, and then you can use yogurt or like cottage cheese. It's super hard to digest, but if you can practice that, your stomach learns how to break down that food while you're running, and it feels horrible, but you're basically training yourself for like worst case sort of thing. And then when you have liquid carbs, it's like, okay, cool, easy, no cramps. So that was something that was interesting. I mean, I haven't looked too much into the science behind it, but I did it and it seems fine. So play around with different things like that.
Incredible. And when I've chatted to a couple of people, I think as amateur runners kind of very much look at kilometers for races, how we can do this kilometer race or that kilometer race. And I've chatted to a few of the elite guys, and for them, it's an hour thing. They factor in their races by hours, not by distance, obviously with trail running as well.
Yeah.
And do you have the same kind of outlook? And, where are you at the moment in terms of how far you can run in terms of the hourly?
Yeah, I definitely started out looking at kilometers, but I think it's because maybe it just comes from a road background where you're like half marathon or marathon. And then as you race more, you start to realize maybe how long something's going to take you. So then it becomes more about hours, because you can do an 80K race that's very flat and it takes you 6 hours, or you can do UTC T55 and it takes you 6 hours. Yeah. So it does become more about hours when you factor in the terrain that you're going to run on. So for me, I'm really enjoying races between 3 to 5 hours. I do want to do some shorter races next year because I think it's good to sit in that really hard effort and practice what that feels like, because you often find the same feeling in a longer run, but it's just harder to mimic that in training. You can recover a lot faster from shorter races as well. So you can do some uphill only races and 20Ks and be in that horrendous pain cave for a short while and just get familiar with that. I think it's really good practice, and it's not something I've done enough of. But where I would like to compete strongly is 3 to 5 hours for now. I'd like to try an 80K, but because I have no idea how long it'll take me, I'm not quite sure yet. And I'm not sure what that longer distance will feel like in my body. So in the next year, hopefully we'll try something like that and then see, do I enjoy it? Don't I? Does it feel good? Do I want to go down that avenue or not? But I think it's good in your first years to stay with the shorter distances and get your body used to that instead of just jumping to the long stuff. It's really taxing. I think once you get into the spirit of trail running, it becomes normal to run 80 to 100K races. It's not normal. It's really far. It's really hard. And especially for the majority of people who aren't pro athletes, you're out there for a long time. So I think just jumping straight into that, I don't think we should normalize that. I think taking your time to get your body used to it, to learn the ropes, to allow time for adaptation is going to see you through many more years of running. Than just jumping straight into ultra running because it's trending.
Yeah. And how do you kind of deal with that kind of big jump between 55 and 100? There isn't really a middle ground. So how are you kind of dealing with that or planning to deal with it?
There's a few races of 70 to 80K that I've eyed out. So I want to try one that's a little bit more low key, where I can test things out and see how it goes. But I don't think I'm going to jump straight to 100. At one point I thought maybe I will, I'll just jump to 100. But I think I prefer a slower progress, give myself time to practice and see what it feels like. So I'll probably do an 80K maybe June next year, potentially. And then if it goes well, I'll look to do another one towards the end of the year. And then if I enjoy that, I'll either stay around that distance or go to 100. But it's still very much an experiment for me.
Yeah. Where, I guess, are you at currently in terms of the travel, in terms of the season, off season, on season? And was this year kind of just a test? And how are you kind of going forward with that?
Yeah, very much a test. And the last while has been like, cool, I think I can do this. I actually ran for the first time since the race today.
Amazing.
So it took a couple of days off. And I think my approach to recovery is like, if I feel like running, it's a good sign. And for a few days, I was like, I do not want to run. So it's important to listen to your body and take it easy. And then probably I'll take another week of unplanned, just easy running before I go into a roadblock. So I'll do a 10K in January and then work towards marathon. And then I'm thinking of Two Oceans, the 56. Nice. So longer on the road and just see what that feels like. It's an iconic South African race that I just really want to do. And then I'll hopefully, depending on how things go, be able to go and race a bit more in Europe for their summer. And then again, I'll just play it by ear for the rest of the year. I don't like to plan too far in advance because I think you get attached to goals and then you can kind of beat yourself up when things don't go according to plan. But it's hard for things to go according to plan. I think it's better to have goals that are closer or nearby, that are achievable, that keep you going, and then be flexible with what the long-term picture looks like.
Yeah. And in terms of basing yourself, do you feel that basing yourself in Europe and then, coming back to South Africa is kind of better for your development, or the other way around, basing yourself in South Africa and kind of selecting European kind of races?
I think it depends on where you feel like, well, firstly, what you have the ability to do. So I'm not quite sure if that's an option for me yet, but also where you feel like you train the best. I think some people train the best when they're home with the community on familiar trails. That's where they get the best out of themselves. For other people, it's in unfamiliar territory, training with people that push them, doing races that get really hard races at a high level. I'm still not sure which one is for me yet. I think next year, if I have the availability, I would like to be based in Europe for the summer. I think I gained a lot of experience from doing that this year, and I can definitely see the benefit for myself for that next year. And then I'll see if that continues to work for me. It'll be amazing, and I have the availability to do that. I would love to do that. But home's also special. And the races that are here, I really love the community here. I love the running here. I'm very good at technical trails. It suits me. So yeah, I'm still very much in the case of finding what works for me.
Yeah. And what are the kind of the big lessons you've learned, I guess, from this year, but maybe also from the past?
I think for a long time I was scared of training too hard, of upping the mileage, of becoming injured. But in the last year, I've slowly upped the mileage. I'm now, previously I was doing 70K weeks. I'm now doing 90 to 100K weeks. At one point in the summer, I pushed it to 140. My body was like, absolutely not. Yeah. But you have to push the limit to find where the limit is. How do you know if you don't try? Yeah. So I found a level now that I think is working for me. It might have to change in future. But for adaptation to occur, you have to be pushing yourself. So a big lesson for me was, it's normal to have weeks where you're tired, where the training really hurts, where the sessions are really hard. And then afterwards it comes easier. It's not, and not every week can feel like that, because I had 3 weeks of really hard training and I was like, no, this is not working. We're not recovering. So a big lesson was, it's like, don't be afraid of working hard, and then be honest with yourself when you're working too hard. When your body's really tired, don't keep pushing, because it pushes back. So that was a big lesson. And then nutrition-wise, realizing how much food I have to eat and being okay with that, because that's what my body needs was huge. Previously, when I wasn't eating enough, I would constantly be craving like pasta. It's like, then you eat the pasta.
Yeah.
Now I eat so much pasta that I'm like, oh, please, no more pasta. Like, much better case to be in. And the recovery was a lot faster. So I think you can't undervalue nutrition and recovery and how much they go together. I think it's so important.
Yeah. And we did chat a bit about the sponsorship. What is the goal there? And is there kind of like, I've got a year to become a professional runner, or it's no longer feasible?
I have to give myself a bit of a cutoff. Life goes very quickly, but it's hard to tell how fast you get better. It's hard to put a timeline and being like, I should be at this point. I should be, X or Y. So the next year, I still want to be putting a lot of effort into my running. Hopefully, so I can find the support to do that. I have been talking to a few brands, but unfortunately, like, it doesn't really cut it just to get gear.
Yeah.
It sounds so maybe bad to say.
No,
I don't know. It's amazing to have at least that, but it's not quite enough to be competing at a high level.
Yeah.
Again, like, if someone has to work a full job and train really, really hard, they're not going to get the best out of the athlete. Yeah. Like, the best athlete is someone who can prioritize the running and then do work in the extra hours that they have. Yeah. So that is definitely the goal, hopefully, as long as I keep enjoying it as well. Yeah. Like, it's got to be that feels really good. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah.
So,
and do you have, I mean, like, I guess in life, a lot of things, it's like, okay, cool, do this and you get this. But it feels obviously with, the sponsorship kind of thing, it's like, do whatever, we'll decide whatever. And, so is there kind of like, what goals you need to hit, or is it kind of like, just get better at it and hopefully it kind of sticks?
I think you have to be performing well at races where people are going to notice. You can't go to a race where no one's there or no one's competing and win it and expect that that's going to be enough. Like, UTCT for South Africans is a big deal because there's a lot of media, there's a lot of eyes.
Yeah.
So it's definitely trying to compete at races that are highly competitive and do well. Yeah. That's where Europe is helpful because so many of the races are highly competitive and somewhere that you can get noticed. Another thing that is annoying because it counts is like ITRA scores and UTMB scores. If you are in the elite bracket, you're there for a reason. It's because you're good. So they do matter, even though the system, we could probably have an entire podcast about. So like having a good score from good performances is really important. And ultimately, if I was asking, because even I've been in the case of being like, how do you get sponsored? You have to be so good people can't ignore you. That's the goal. So focusing on the training, focusing on the races, and then hopefully if that's not enough, then there's like nothing else I can do.
Yeah. And would you rather be like the best in South Africa or, like top 20, top 30 in Europe? Have you had that kind of thought as well?
I think I don't think that if I stayed in South Africa and raced here and I was the best in South Africa, it would be enough for me because I think to get the best out of myself, you need to be pushed by someone. Yeah. Like, it's unbelievable what your body can do when you see someone just in front of you on a race and you know that, okay, if I can get in front of her, I'm going to place, If you can't see that person pushing you in front of you, why would you need to run faster? It's really hard to know that you actually can, that you've got that extra gear. So I think to get the best out of myself, which is ultimately what I want to be competing at races in Europe, America, somewhere where there are people who are absolutely better than me. And then hopefully I have a good race and that absorbs and one day I'm better than them potentially. Yeah, I think that would be the goal for me as opposed to just being the best in South Africa.
Yeah. And, advice-wise, when people ask you, what is the kind of advice you would give to someone starting out trail running? And, on that note, what does the future look like in terms of advice, in terms of coaching? Is that something, you have talked about geeking out and all of that. So is that something that you're thinking about?
Yeah. So I'll answer the both. Yeah. Advice when you're starting out, don't try to cheat the system by going super hard. It's just not going to work. That's one of the beautiful things about running is no one else can do it for you. You can't just swap your legs out and run really well. You have to train your legs. Yeah, exactly. And it just takes time. So consistently showing up, honestly, I think will get you a lot further than like running all out effort every single day. Yeah. Consistency, definitely huge. And then try and have goals that are achievable because it keeps you motivated. I think it's the same, like even on my level, it's different now. But to go to a race and be like, I want to win, the chances of being disappointed are pretty high. And then that's demotivating to keep going. So even in training, it's like, okay, I really want to do my intervals at this pace. And it's realistic, but it's going to push me. And then just achieving that, like it's a small goal in a week that makes you feel so good and keeps you motivated for next week. And being like, okay, I did this hill at this time. I think I can do it a little bit faster next time. It's small goals that'll just keep you going. And then when you go to a race, it's like, for me, it's way better to focus on a time goal. That's something that I know is going to push me, but it's achievable. And I leave feeling like, oh, cool, did what I came to do. Feels so good.
Yeah.
On to the next one.
Amazing.
I think that's really important. And then, I think I would love to coach, but only when I feel like I can really have the knowledge to help someone. I think it would do more damage if I just was like, yeah, I'll coach you. So I'm learning, and that's something that I love about working with Robbie is actually, I said to him when we started, I was like, I want someone that I can feel comfortable to ask a lot of questions. I'm probably going to. I'm going to want to know why you've given me this session or that session, or what, like, how is this helping me? What could I be doing to improve that? And he really likes that as well. So I have been learning a lot from him. And then I am working with one athlete that I said, look, I'm not a coach. I'm not going to pretend that I know everything, but she wanted me to help her. And I was like, I will, if you can just acknowledge that I'm not a coach, and that it's going to be you learning from me and me learning by teaching you, like working together. And it's been amazing. It's been really, really fun.
Incredible.
To see someone achieve little goals and like to want to get the best out of them, and to like, if I have a bad day and that person has it's so cool. It's really, really cool.
Amazing. And you've mentioned a lot about goals and stuff. So, and you mentioned about the realistic goals. So short term, medium term, long term, what's on the kind of the vision board
of races?
Your training races. Okay.
Short term, this one kind of scares me, as I want to do in the next roadblock on sub 3 hours.
Sure.
So we'll see how that goes. But I think that'll help the long-term goals. Next year, I would like to hopefully at an 80K race that I'm looking at. I'm looking at Lavaredo, but I'm not sure I can get there. So if I can, then podium there would be a big goal for next year.
Sure.
And then 2 years from now, hopefully maybe something like CCC. But I think as a first go, it'll be more of a time-based goal than like podium. Just to keep things realistic. But again, we'll see if I enjoy 80K and then how 100 feels. Otherwise, I'll probably keep it in the 50K realm and then switch up the goals.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
This was amazing. And I'm really, really excited to see where you go in the next year.
Thanks.
And hopefully next year UTCT will be
able to finish.
chatting to one of the races.
Thanks.
So thank you.
That'll
And
be
good
great.
luck.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.